You are listening to Heroes Never Die, your one-stop spot for all the latest news, Overwatch League results, and mishaps in Overwatch. Here are your hosts, Totemly Drunk and Edinar.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Heroes Never Die, your one-stop spot for all things Overwatch. I am your host, Totemly Drunk, and tonight is episode 120. We're going to be discussing the latest Overwatch news. We'll see how Symmetra is doing compared to some of the other DPS characters in the game. The LA Gladiators had a pretty questionable decision to bench, kind of like their star player ahead of the playoffs, which was also a thing. We are going to talk about what went down last week in Overwatch League, and of course, preview tonight's semifinals matches, which, do extend throughout the weekend. But before we get into the news and introduce you to my co-hosts, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us tonight, an hour earlier, as, it is playoff hype time, for our live show, and of course, thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So, joining me tonight, as always, is my co-host, Edinar. Ed, it's been an interesting week. We've had some pretty big news, some upcoming balance changes, which we'll probably get into more in-depth next week, once maybe they'll be on the PTR. But we have the release date for Hammonds, we got Overwatch League playoffs, Overwatch League on TV. So much is going on, but how has your week been, my friend?
Okay, so I haven't told you I'm telling this story yet, but I'm going to. So let me set the scene here. Charity Bags game. Now, Bags, or Cornhole as some people know it, I was playing a Charity Bags game. We're in the championship game. We are up, I think it was 14-9. I sink my first bag. I sink my second. I sink my third to clinch the championship, but I have to go for that fourth bagger.
Mm-hmm.
I throw the fourth bag, I sink it. I turn to celebrate. Boom. Dislocate my knee. So, yeah. I've had an interesting week. I spent a lot of time in the hospital, but it was a victory celebration, so I'm okay with it. Like, I came away with the win, but I also came away with the medical bills. So yes, for those keeping track, I dislocated my knee in a non-contact sport because I am winning at life. But in the form of Overwatch, it's been a fun week. We played a little bit before the show.
We did.
I've been playing a lot of Hanzo lately. I'm not going to say I'm phenomenal, but I'm decent at him. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's interesting getting to play Hanzo a lot. I'm interested. I need to start doing my placements, though. I'm severely lacking in the placement department. So, how has your week been?
Work's kind of been an interesting thing with our new system in place. We've had some issues with that. In regards to placements, I knocked 4 out on stream on Saturday. I had 2 really good games at the start, and then, of course, that was followed by 2 really awful games. And both times, I was solo supporting, so I was on Mercy at this time. Otherwise, I was, playing Zenyatta, as, the flex support. And I was wanting to run, triple tank, and our other support was basically okay, and then, I was wanting to have Roadhog for the triple tank, because we were running near Rissa as one of the other tanks, and, they just went D.Va. And I was like, this isn't really going to work as well as I would have liked. And, I'd already played a Roadhog prior in 2 of the other matches as the flex tank, and I was doing good, so to see someone else kind of, take that role and then, maybe, not actually go to play the Mercy so I could, put us in a better position to win, yeah, it was just kind of a steamroll. All 4 games, basically, both in my favor and against me, so it's been a mixed bag all in all. We did play a couple of games of Arcade earlier, which was a good start, and then we hit kind of a wall trying to get our third, Arcade win for today. So, a lot of weird things, with, triple Orisa comps, trying to burst through shields with a Pharah didn't really work. I mean, I can do as much damage as I want, but, That's way too many shields to try to eat through. So yeah, that's the thing. But all in all, it's been a pretty good week. Obviously, we got Overwatch League playoffs, a ton of contenders going on. I'm hyped, and I'm sure a lot of people
geeked out
are.
all yesterday about
Mhm.
contenders. I'm sure you guys were sick of me in the staff lounge, but I don't care. Sugar Free is a freaking god. Sugar Free OWL MVP in 3 years.
I mean,
3 years. 3 years when he can actually play in the Overwatch League.
mhm.
MVP.
There's a reason why one of our backcap show titles was Sugar Free Prodigy. But going into the news from this week, we have an update on everyone's favorite bald, Hammond. He is going to be hitting live servers next week. That is on Tuesday, July 24th. And I know that the Overwatch team will be hosting a behind-the-scenes look with a panel at San Diego Comic-Con. So they'll be discussing Hammond a bit more in depth with that. So, like other new heroes and new maps, it'll be some time before we do see Hammond hit competitive play. And, Hammond is still, a very interesting hero. He has a ton of area denial. He has very good tank mobility. Obviously, the second most mobile hero in the game at this point, outside of, Pharah and Widow, basically. And... he's a pretty beefy body overall because, he just with that personal shield or armor, it's quite a bit to kind of eat through. So the real question is, well, what exactly is going to be Hammond's role in Overwatch, and where is this meta going to shift? Because, we saw an update on the forums in regard to some upcoming support changes, which... we're kind of in a hurry tonight because obviously we got the semifinal matches, so we're planning on covering that next week, and chances are those updates to the balance changes for support heroes will be on the PTR by then. But by the looks of it, I think we're all kind of in agreement that chances are, there's a very good chance that we will see, triple dive tank compositions coming out, with a Winston, a D.Va, and Hammond being that third tank. But, where do you think Hammond is really going to fit into things? Because it seems like so much right now is going to revolve around whether or not these players are actually good at using the grappling hook and get into that high mobility areas.
So he's so hard to judge because he's not a main tank. He doesn't have the ability to really. When you think main tank, you think what? Orisa, Ryan, Winston. Tanks that can shield or protect. Wrecking Ball can't. Or sorry, Hammond can't. So it can't protect, but he's better than a flanking tank, better than a D.Va. He's more tanky than a D.Va. So where a D.Va can't really be in the front line by herself, for the most part, the D.Va should be flanking, taking up support, stuff like that. Whereas, Hammond should be, I don't know where he fits in. He's like a hybrid of both of them. I don't know if he fits best with, a Reinhardt or Zarya, or if he fits best with another D.Va or Winston. Honestly, he probably fits best as a third tank. And I think that's where he'll fit in. I could see them doing a new form of dive, especially with what we'll talk about next week with the changes to the healers, is you can get more of a divey comp going now, and I think Hammond could be a great piece to that. Now, you mentioned the grappling hook that, Hammond will have. Now, when I say, he'd be a great third tank, he will be played wrong 99.9% of the time.
At least initially.
Initially, it's bound to happen. This is why they don't put him into comp right away, because people are going to experiment. People are, going to mess around and not treat him as a tank. They're going to treat him as a flanker who has a lot of health, when in reality, probably should be in the middle of the fight or chasing down snipers. This is a good anti-Hanzo, anti-Widowmaker character, but also a character who can get right in the mix of things and, can hold their own. Won't kill a lot of people, but like the ultimate stall character. Like Hammond is the ultimate stall character because the more characters that they have on point, the more shield he gets, and then I'm just thinking of the first point of the Hanamura. Like just getting on point and spinning around and around that bell. Like people like it's gonna be annoying. It's gonna be like a super speed Lucio trying to kill that also does damage to you if you get close to it. So I think he doesn't quite fit in as a main tank, doesn't quite fit in as an off tank, but is a hybrid of both. So it will be interesting to see how he's played. If he's played, I don't know if his kit is good enough for like the pros for Overwatch League. I don't see him fitting in really, unless they do GOATS comp and fit him in somehow that way. I just don't think his kit is good enough to warrant having him in there at this point. Now, will he have probably great win percentage around like Diamonds, Masters? Probably. And then the lower you get, the worse your win rate is because the lower you get, the more wrong he's going to get played. So, I don't know. Where do you see him? Do you see him? I mean, do you see him being an off tank? Because I think that was our initial response was, okay, he's going to be an off tank.
Well, here's the thing. Like, to me, Hammond doesn't even feel like a tank. Like, the only thing that really makes him a tank is the fact that he has a lot of, HP and shield. But, I absolutely agree. Like, I see him being more of a stall type character, especially on assault maps. 2 CPs already a lull fest. It is going to be that times 10 when Hammond comes out on live server. But, like, to me, like, I don't know exactly what role he's going to fit. I really feel like we will see kind of, like, the return of Dive, but I can't really say, like, straight out, like, I feel like Hammond is an actual tank just because, like, he doesn't have the toolkit of a normal tank, really. I mean, he's there, and, I mean, I guess, like, the biggest takeaway is it's, at least when you're, like, activating your shield or whatever, like, you're not being, like, an alt battery like you would be if you were, say, a Roadhog, so that is something, but for now, like, I really don't know where he's going to sit. Obviously, we've kind of seen, like, how Symmetra has kind of fallen into place, in the new meta, which we'll talk about in a bit. But Hammond, I feel like is going to be another one of those characters that is going to take a lot of time in order, to see, like, the true potential, just because of, the skill ceiling that this character has. So it's going to be an interesting next couple of weeks. I'm sure, we'll see more and more Hammond rollouts coming out on the Reddits across the board, really. But, all in all, like, I really do like playing him. It's just, I'm just not completely sold on the kit. Like, his ultimate to me just feels like you're not really using it, like, offensively. It's more, you're just going to, like, wall off, a certain doorway or a ramp or whatever, so they can't go that path and things like that. So I'm really curious to see, like, what sort of interactions we'll be seeing with the minefield in pro play, but, it's probably going to be some time before we actually do see him in any form of tournament. But let's go ahead, let's move on, let's talk a little bit about, just Overwatch as a whole and how things have, kind of changed a bit lately, in what is considered to be a shocking development, guys. You guys aren't going to believe this. Players are being less toxic since the introduction of the endorsement system and the looking for group tool. What? So our dad and savior, Papa Jeffy Capcap, praise him.
Praise him.
He took to the Overwatch forums to let us know that incidences of abuse are down among players in the Americas and Korea. And I will sidetrack here and say that all of the stats have not been reported yet, so who knows how things are looking in Europe or some of the other regions. These are just the ones that we know right now. I'm sure it's, down across the board, but, You know, a lot of people have been kind of like trolling on the forums about, well, what about Europe? They're never going to improve. You know, things like that. But we have seen that abusive chat in competitive is down 26.4% in Americas, 16.4% in Korea, with the number of daily players being abusive to others down 28.8% in Americas and 21.6% in Korea. And, man, like, when I was looking at these numbers, that is a staggering number. It just shows you just how bad things had gotten to that point where, you know, we had, you know, pretty much every game there was at least one, maybe two people on your team, you know, just being a total douche nozzle, you know, things like that. But it's good to actually see some stats in play. But, you know, the biggest question mark at the end of the day is the longevity of this. You know, are they going to have to keep adding things to this endorsement system to maintain the same sort of level of results, basically? So that's really where the true question lies at this point. But, you know, I'm happy to say that what they have in place is definitely working. You know, you and I have been in quite a bit. You know, I haven't really had a lot of toxic players in any of my games, even in competitive, which is a drastic turnaround from, you know, the past 10 seasons. So it's a win in my books.
Yeah, no, this is great. This was actually, I mean, like you said, a lot more than I thought it'd be. Like I knew toxicity would go down because of this. I didn't expect it to go down so much. Now, people who think that they need to maintain this number are like fooling themselves. Like, it went down initially. It's probably going to drop down to, hey, this, you know, in like 3 months, it'll be like, it went down 3%. And like, that's still a win. It's just because you got rid of all the you know, the ass hats the first quarter and got rid of them being toxic. Now you're just slowly dipping away. As far as like having to give them something else, I don't want it to come to the point where it's an abusive system. Like right now you get what, 50 XP for giving out each endorsement?
Yeah, which I don't even like that. Like, I don't think you should be rewarded for doing it like that with something like XP.
If it's such a minimal amount of XP, but the thing is it, if they didn't offer that, the majority of people would just not even use it. And it wouldn't matter to people. Now, in looking for group, I don't know. I haven't set one up in a while, but I can't remember. Have they put in the ability to have a specific like rank?
I've honestly not used it in a couple of weeks, so I don't even know.
Okay, yeah, because I don't know if that's in there yet. So like, and that's the big thing, is because the looking for group, well, a lot of people complain. Overall, massive success. And that's what people want, is like, if they don't want to get a low, you know, endorsement level because it might affect their LFG like abilities. Like at a certain point, it's going to be like, okay, you need to have a level 5 or higher to join our group. Well, some people are like, just like, it's working perfectly as intended. It is legit working perfectly as intended. I think keep it where it's at, see where it's at. The only time we should be worried is if Kaplan comes out and says, oh, we had a rise of 5% in toxicity. And then you have to look at it, because then people have stopped caring. But I don't think that's anytime soon. I really don't. But I mean, it's doing exactly what everyone thought it would do. It's just doing it in bigger numbers than what we expected.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're definitely see a bit more of a fall off as time passes on, just because, you know, the first one was kind of like a full like swoop in, you know, just trimming quite a bit off the top, and then, you know, it'll be a little bit layer by layer at that point. But moving on, let's talk about some of the hot community topics from this past week, and we gotta talk about Symmetra, right? So obviously, you know, Symmetra has hit competitive play. It's been a couple of weeks now. And our good buddy Switch over at OmnicMeta.com released a new analysis based on Symmetra, comparing her to basically like the rest of the damage field. So, her damage output is up 25% on average across all tiers. You know, it's a pretty significant jump. The problem is, when it comes to Symmetra, she is still falling behind, you know, the vast majority of the other damage heroes in the game. I believe, like, Widow was, I think, like, the only one that was actually trailing her at this point. But, like, she's still trailing, like, your spam heroes, like a Pharah, Junkrat, Hanzo, and that can be upwards of, like, 30%. That's a significant amount, too. But, like, all in all, like, you know, she is averaging more final blows per 10 minutes, but she's still falling behind everyone else on that, and as a matter of fact, she's dead last among all of the damage heroes in-game when it comes to final blows per 10 minutes, and even most of the tanks are higher than Symmetra as well. So, like, in regards to her pick rate, we haven't seen too much fluctuation there, but, you know, it's kind of interesting, because in the past with these, like, hero reworks, you know, when Hanzo got reworked, when Sombra got reworked, when some of the major Ana changes came out, we did see quite a bit of a spike in the pick rate, and that's not been the case with Symmetra. With Symmetra, it's been more like 2-3%. But her win rate is dipping about 5% across all tiers of play. And really, like, you know, it's very hard to justify playing a Symmetra over another damage dealer at this point, just seeing how far she's, you know, lacking behind. And plus, a lot of people are still learning kind of like the ins and outs when it comes to teleport locations and some of the tricks that you can do, or just having to build around the specific parts of the teleporter as well. Like, if you want to run, you know, the Bastion or, you know, the turret through it, all of that good stuff. But as a whole, Symmetra is not faring too well right now, and really, like, it hasn't been much of a change because she's still not seeing that much play.
Yeah, I mean, I've faced her. The thing is she's not difficult to go against. Like, from a distance, her attack is easily avoidable. It really is. Like, her right click, easily avoidable. Her turrets are super easy to locate and kill.
And they're slow.
Like, and they're slow. Like, so any of her attacks are just useless. Like, and all right, PSA for Symmetra players out there. Sorry, this might hurt. Here's the one thing that you can tell if you're playing her right or wrong. Did you left click? If the answer is yes, you're playing Symmetra wrong. Like, that's how bad her main fire is. Her main fire is basically useless. It really is. Like, because it has such a big ramp-up time. You'd be better off right-clicking and getting those orbs firing. Get those orbs firing. But they're so easy to avoid. It's the only thing she really brings to the team is her teleporter. And like you said, people haven't quite figured out, but is just having her teleporter enough to warrant her being on the team? Probably not. Like, you may have certain strats where you need her for a quick time being. Like, I can see, like, you know, point A of King's Row having a Symmetra to get, like, your entire team up on the ledge right away for a sneak attack, something like that. But like, I still don't see her being viable. And like you said, her pick rate hasn't really changed. Still bottom of the barrel. Final blows gone up, but still bottom of the barrel. She does more damage, yes, but that's usually just splash damage from her spamming her right click. So I don't know. I also at a lot of points where her ultimate is just useless. If you're escorting the payload, your ultimate is sometimes just useless because you're following a moving point. Well, your shield's not moving. So unless you're on defense trying to like stop people, then yes, that might work. But on offense, it's useless. So like there's so many maps and so many objectives where she is not playable, but everyone's playing her, and it's just not working. Like when I go up against a Symmetra, it's like 6v versus 5.5. Just like it was last time. Like her kit's better. Her kit is a lot better. I'm not gonna deny that. But Symmetra is still trash tier.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, with the new teleporter, they definitely did raise the skill ceiling, but it's at a huge trade-off of just not having the same amount of burst with that splash damage as, like, a Pharah or a Junkrat. So, like...
And not going through shields.
Right.
That's the big thing. Like, if her right-click could go through shields, whole different ballgame. Like, she would be awesome if her right-click could go through shields, but it just can't. And... I mean, that would be the one change I would make to her to make her more viable, is allow her right click to go through shields.
Yeah, I can see that. And, it's funny because, like, when the changes were coming through, a lot of the pro players were, hyping her up, and then, she came out, and we're just like, this is it? Like, this is what everyone was so worried about? So, like, I don't know what the pro players were doing with her to make her seem so viable, but again, like, there were a ton of bugs with Symmetra on the PTR for the rework, where you could basically, like, ramp up her left click instantly, and then she did phenomenal damage, and she was completely broken, but, they kind of fixed that. Maybe she needs it back. Don't do that.
You mean her left click charging on, a broken, gate?
Yeah.
That's not a good thing?
No, the Destructibles, yeah. No, definitely not. But let's move on. Let's talk about one of the bigger news bits from this past week, which has had a lot of people not so happy with a particular Overwatch League team, and for good reason, right? Like, okay, so going into the playoffs, the LA Gladiators decided that they were going to not play Fissure in this series against the London Spitfire. This was kind of like a slit from Malik Forte during a pre-show, and, it was a weird, like turn of events where, like, the Gladiators came out, they released a statement that basically just said absolutely nothing. They're like, we're gonna put ourselves in the best chance to win, and we feel that iRemix starting that main tank is going to be what gives us that best chance. And then we had Slasher coming out, mentioning all these things about how Fisher's unhappy with the Gladiators because the team wasn't trying hard enough for the playoffs, and how, they just stopped communicating in scrimmages, and that he wanted to play in an all-Korean team, and that wouldn't be with the Gladiators. And it just got exaggerated to the point where Fisher was like, whoa, no, and he's trying to correct everything that, Slasher is saying, trying to discredit him. And there's just been a whirlwind of, like, different things, and people saying, he said, she said, and it goes back and forth, and it's been exhausting. Like, I stopped, like, paying attention to it after the first response from Fisher to Slasher, but at the end of the day, like, I find it impossible to believe that with a shift in the meta, that someone the caliber of Fisher wouldn't be able to adapt his play. Like, that boggles my mind, like, that they felt like they needed a complete overhaul, at least at the main tank role, where, iRemix, who had only been practicing really for a couple of weeks with the team, was a better option, because really, at the end of the day, Fisher was the reason that the Gladiators got to where they were. As soon as he was traded from London, the Gladiators looked like a completely different team, and they were playing as one of the hottest teams throughout Stage 4, and putting iRemix in, I would say he was serviceable, but I don't believe that he would have been the better option over Fisher, who was in the run-in for Overwatch League MVP. Spoiler, he didn't win, but we'll get into that in just a little bit.
Yeah, okay, so I've actually followed this a little. So here's the thing. There's a fine line between what Slasher was reporting and what Fisher is saying.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have been bashing Slasher. I honestly, I wholeheartedly agree with this, is Slasher just doesn't make up this stuff. He just doesn't. He doesn't just come up with this stuff out of thin air. People inside tell him this stuff. It's the only way. It's how him, Adam Schefter, Adrian Wojnarowski, the insiders actually get information from inside sources. So there is some truth to it. But I will say this, he probably over-exaggerates it for clicks, for clickbait. I think the Gladiators, and taking Slasher and all that stuff out of it, is between Fissure and the Gladiators, this is not repairable. Like, there's no reason Fissure shouldn't have been the main tank. I don't care if he's not good at all in this meta, and this meta being Hanzo. Like, Hanzo is not going to make the runner-up in the Overwatch League MVP useless. He's just not. I don't care what anyone says. It's just not going to happen. So the fact that the team came out with this, and it's come out afterwards that the team basically was like, hey, we're going to go with iRemix. We're going to run with him with the rest of the playoffs. And Fissure just basically being like, yeah, that's fine. Like, there's so much animosity between Fissure and the Gladiators at this point. Something happened. Something had to happen. Like legit, Fissure posted today on Twitter, like, screenshots of Discord messages he had with the Gladiators saying, we're going to run with the iRemix as the tank for the rest of the playoffs. You don't have to come to scrims. You don't have to come to practices. You don't have to come to the, any of that stuff. Like, this is beyond repair. Like, beyond repair. Fissure will not be with the Gladiators next year. I mean, I kind of believe Slasher, and then they also were on ESPN today with Monte Cristo and stuff like that, about him going to Seoul. I don't know if he'll go to Seoul. I think he might go to a new team, like one of the new expansion teams. But Chicago, cough, cough, Chicago. He will go to a new team at the end of this year, and something drastic had to happen. Like, even watching Sureforce stream, he was like, how do I put this? Like, he wasn't like agreeing with the Gladiators in response to Fissure, but he was just kind of brushing off the fact that, like, he would make these like little one-off comments about like, about iRemix or about the Gladiators organization, basically being like, no. The Gladiators were in the right. Fissure is batshit crazy. And we've seen this before, like with Rascal, with the Fuel. Like, it's just a matter of Rascal wanted this specific kind of practice, this. And it's just not in the U.S. system, and that's what you get from mixed teams. And it used to be Fissure and the Gladiators were like the perfect shining example of a not all Korean team that could still mesh well together. Well, that shit flew out the window. But it's one of those things where it's going to be an ugly breakup. It needs to happen sooner rather than later. So first day, trade Fissure for Ryu Jaehong. Boom. There you go. But it's gonna be interesting to see how this unfolds. I'm not putting all the blame on the Gladiators. The Gladiators handled this wrong. They could have handled it more professionally, but I also think Fissure handled it very bad. He needed to just shut up instead of going on Twitter, going on Reddit, going on all these places, trying to make excuses, posting stuff. Like, that's not what an organization or teammates wants to see. Is like, the first time you get criticized seriously, you just start throwing people under the bus. Like, you're just like, no, this is what my team told me. This is what they like, with not even showing up to the stadium. He's like, well, they gave me the option and I decided not to come. Well, that's on you. That's not on the Gladiators. As a player, you should want to be there to cheer on your team.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't know. I want to get real mad at Fisher on this, but I don't know what happened behind the scenes to cause this animosity between the team and Fisher. And, you know, it's Void is also going to be gone from the team because they brought in Void to play with Fisher. Right? Was that Void or?
That was Void.
Yeah,
because they had played on Condupe and Thera prior.
Yeah, Void and Fisher are as good as gone from this team. So it will be interesting. It will be very interesting. I don't know. I've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah, and you know, like most things, the truth kind of like falls somewhere in the middle. But you know, I think regardless of how things went down, when you're put in that position, just as a teammate, you need to be there to cheer and support your team, regardless of whether or not you're actually playing. Just don't take your ball and go home. And you know, that's not just to throw everything at Fisher, because you know Asher too was also someone that stayed home that wasn't going to be used as well. So it's not like he was the only one doing that. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like, Fisher's definitely going to go to a new team. I would not be surprised if they drop Void as well, just because they were kind of a package deal, so to speak. But I know Soul would be gladly, you know, willing to bring Fisher onto the team, as they will definitely need a new main tank going into Season 2. They have made some other adjustments, which we'll talk about. So let's go ahead. Let's go inside Overwatch Contenders and Overwatch League, and let's start with what's going down in Contenders. So we had a ton of games in NA. We had some pretty good series. We had what was the first Open Division team to defeat an Overwatch League Academy team, which is a pretty big deal. So, Ed, why don't you let everyone know what went down this past week in Contenders?
All right, so for starters, we'll go with Lucky Future. We'll start with Korea. So, Lucky
China.
Future defeated China. Sorry, Lucky Future defeated Team CC, the Dragons team, 3-1. Six Snakes defeated the British Hurricane, the Spitfire team, 3-1. The Hurricane, what is going on with them?
They are tail spinning.
Bum bum. Ooh. Sorry. They really are. So, all right, we'll go get past that. We'll get to the NA. So Toronto Esports, so Uprising, defeated Sky Foxes 3-2. So good on them. In a matchup that was actually pretty huge, which turned out not to be that huge, the XL2 Academy defeated Team Envy, which is Fuel, 3-1. NRG Esports, so Shock defeated Bi-Week 4-0. And the big upset, the big one, Sugar Free, last night's Leftover defeated Gladiators Legion 3-2. So that was massive. I think everyone on the desk predicted 4-0 for that one, in the form of Gladiators Legion winning 4-0, and then it was Fusion University defeated Mayhem Academy 4-0. So what happens in Contender and Overwatch League happens in Contenders. And then in the last game, GG Esports, the Outlaws team, defeated Second Wind 3-1. So there were some real duds, but there was some real good games.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's important to note, like, for Fusion University, now all of them are at a team house. So they're all playing in the same environment. They're not having to deal, you know, playing on specific servers for their Korean players. You know, same with XL2 Academy. And man, that XL2 Academy versus Team Envy game was pretty interesting, because we saw how good Envy looked, you know, in prior weeks, and then XL2 just came out and they basically just shat on them. It was a good series to watch overall. So yeah, tons of stuff going on in NA, and it's definitely looking like Fusion and XL2 are going to be the teams to beat for sure. But I was really happy to see LNL get that win, because that was basically history in the making. But let's go ahead and let's talk about the Overwatch League, because, you know, it is a pretty big week. So first up, they did add something new to the All Access Pass. And that is a new legendary Lucio emote that will be going live on July 24th. So it'll be next Tuesday. So if you have the All Access Pass, make sure next Tuesday you log into your Twitch, you claim your loot, and then you'll be able to get it in game. And it's basically, Lucio just scratching the turntables. So, getting back to his DJ roots, and I'm saying, I was pretty excited with this one, just in regards to the actual emote in itself. There's a bit more going on in this one compared to some of the other ones that we have seen in the past, but what were your takes on this one?
I mean, I really like it. I compare it to some of the other legendary emotes.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the Diva and I think the Zarya are the only two that have a legendary emote. I mean, I like it because it's more free shit I get for something I already have.
Mm-hmm.
Like Spider said it best on Monday. He's like, I'll take more stuff for something I already have. Like, I already have the Twitch All Access Pass. You get a crap load of skins with it. I'll just take an awesome emote with it. Hopefully, when the emote comes out, it doesn't automatically show that ugly, super ugly Overwatch League skin that he has on. And it has a different skin on.
Mm-hmm.
But, this is awesome. I mean, it's more free stuff to give people as incentive to be Twitch All Access. Because really, with the introduction of ESPN and Disney and all that fun stuff, the Twitch viewership is gonna go down pretty dramatically. We even saw that last week. And anything they can do to get more people on Twitch watching, the better. So something like this, like I don't watch it. If there wasn't a Twitch All Access Pass with like getting tokens and stuff like that,
right?
And I had the choice between Twitch without any free stuff and watching it on ESPN3 or Disney XD, I'd choose the other ones hands down every time because I can just watch it on my TV instead of on my monitor. Now, granted, what I do is I keep it up on my monitor and still watch it on my TV, but they don't care because it's viewership. Like, Twitch doesn't care as long as you're, signed on and watching. Like, they don't care if you participate. So, I like it. I'm going to use it. I don't play Lucio. So it's basically Mr. Heroes emote for me.
Right. But yeah, just talking about the viewership real quick, since you brought that up, we do know, last Wednesday we had 174,000 viewers for the Disney XD show. Then on Friday we saw a bit of a dip there, but it was 127,000. I haven't checked back to see if the Saturday numbers were up, but it is worth noting that this was the only Disney XD show that had made the top 150 for that night on TV, which is something that they normally don't do. So for Overwatch League to come in and just do that right off the bat is absolutely huge, and I'm sure both sides are very happy about that. But let's go ahead, let's move on. Let's talk about, some pretty big changes that happened with the Seoul Dynasty. So, we've talked at length about the disappointment of a season that it was for my hashtag soulmates, right? And they're looking to make some changes ahead of Season 2, and that includes a complete overhaul of the coaching staff. That's what they started with. So basically, they let all the coaches go. The only person that was on that coaching staff that was kept was Hokuri, who was promoted to the general manager. So this was the guy that led GC Busan to a championship in OGN Overwatch Apex Season 4. And that was the team that won the championship in their first qualification of that tournament because they had qualified through Apex Challengers, which nowadays would basically be like Open Division. And they're the only team to do that, right? So they were the only team to what they had dubbed like the Royal Road. So winning that major in their first qualification, which is a huge deal. And everyone else got let go. So that includes Beast, who was a former GM and the head coach. They got rid of Always Sue, who was another coach, Nugget, and Bubbly. So really no surprise, right? After how Seoul kind of unfolded and how, there were just a ton of inconsistencies kind of throughout the season. Fleta early on looked really good, had quite a bit of fall off. Obviously, we had the whole Ryuje Khan situation going on. That didn't really work so well. In the later weeks of it anyway, it worked kind of okay at the start. But all in all, like, there were a lot of questionable decisions being made, a lot of weird substitutions. You can go on and on, but, you know, what's interesting is, you know, this is one of the teams that was basically going in, like, one of the heralded Overwatch League teams, or at least Overwatch teams, that had a ton of success outside of the Overwatch League. The same thing happened with, you know, Envious, aka the Dallas Fuel. So with that being said, Ed, you know, we've seen a lot of teams kind of come up to the forefront, especially in Korea. Do you feel like these Overwatch League expansion teams are going to overlook building around a core roster just due to the fact that, you know, the Dynasty and the Fuel basically just were in shambles throughout the majority of the season? Do you think that's going to deter them from approaching these teams?
Yes. Well, yes and no. So, like, the teams that they approach now are going to be teams built around the Overwatch League. The teams like the Seoul Dynasty and the Dallas Fuel approached and got were the best of random people put together. Like, how do I put this? The teams that, like, the Dallas Fuel and Seoul Dynasty picked up were teams put together by semi-professional companies. Like, Overwatch, like, it wasn't like a 20-30 million dollar company scouting out these players and putting them together. These were like people who had other full-time jobs trying to put together a team when they got done with work, type of thing. Like, you know, they just took what the best players they could find through reputation, rank, and seeing play and put them together, and it worked because there was no, like, professional setting. Like, there was no Overwatch League or contenders for them to pick players off of. But once you get these contenders teams that have the backing and have the, okay, we're going to scout these players, we're going to see who works together, and then we'll put together a team based on that. That's a little different than the thrown together, Dallas Fuel team from before Overwatch League. It was like, okay, well, we need a support. Who's a good support? Okay, we'll go get them. Or they're friends with them. They play well together. Let's grab them. Well, that's just basing it off of player feedback instead of, like, coaching feedback, almost. Now, is that tried and true? No. But, like, look at New York Excelsior. Look at the LA Valiant. The LA Valiant, they didn't come from a team. They just picked people who they scouted that would work well together and put them together. Dallas Fuel and Shanghai Seoul Dynasty basically were like, well, this team's done good in the past. Let's just grab the whole team and hope for the best. So, I mean, London Spitfire even saw that, because London Spitfire was Cloud9. And then they realized it, and then they, got two teams together, and they started making the best out of the players that they had, and so on and so forth. So, like, they bought teams, but then they realized those teams aren't the best together. So we need to try and mesh teams together to see who actually works best together. So it will be interesting. I don't think we'll run into the same problem again with Seoul Dynasty and Dallas Fuel, because we have, like, a minor league system. So you'll be able to tell in an Overwatch League setting, essentially, being called to the big leagues, if the team works well together.
Yeah, and just a quick note, like, I feel like it's important to also state, like, when you kind of compare where Envious and Lunatic High were at the time when they were signed, really not a lot of other teams, at least in the current landscape, have kind of hit that ceiling that they had at that given time. So, that could also be a reason to be a little bit weary. But, you do have a lot of young up-and-coming talent, especially in Korea. We've seen it all over contenders, kind of across the globe. So there are unlimited amount of options for people to build, these Frankenstein teams like we'd kind of seen with like a team like the Philadelphia Fusion for Season 2.
Oh yeah, like or Chicago. Chicago would work.
Mm-hmm.
And they could get Fissure. Wait, no, they couldn't get Fissure. You can't build a Frankenstein team with Fissure. It's just not allowed anymore. Sorry, had to get that one last dig in there about Fissure.
All right, well let's move on. Let's talk about the Overwatch League MVP. I'm excited about this because we get to talk about a support player. What? So it should really come to no surprise that the Overwatch League's first MVP is the New York Excelsior support / DPS / third damage dealer, JJoNak, right? So JJoNak secured the T-Mobile fan vote. He received 31 first place votes from the group that consisted of the different coaches, the broadcast team, different media members, and we do know who the runner-ups were. Fissure came in second, and Carpe finished in third place. Now, we've talked at length about how JJoNak has kind of changed the game to the point where we've seen other teams try to mimic what New York Excelsior are doing, because obviously, New York kind of run shot through the majority of this current season. So much to the point where all these other Zenyatas were trying to channel their inner JJoNak, and they were sufferers of JJoNak syndrome. But let's talk about stats with JJoNak, right? So damage per 10 minutes, JJoNak was 22% higher than the average. His final blows per 10 minutes was 36.6% higher than the average. And the biggest deal with this is the fact that this is a guy that had no professional Overwatch match history coming into the Overwatch League. He had grinded through the ladder. So we go back to when the Overwatch League was announced, when they were doing, the hype videos. They showed a specific gamer tag, that being Crusher99, the guy that, rose up the ranks and then made an impact on, the big stage. And JJoNak is that guy. It's so hard to fathom that someone that good never had, the platform prior, outside of just playing on the ladder. So for him to come in as, basically a ladder hero, and then to be, one of the hard carries on the New York Excelsior, and then just be the best Zenyatta on the planet, speaks absolute volumes about him as a player. And, it's just, I'm happy. It honestly could not go to anyone else. JJoNak was definitely the front runner pretty much the entirety of the season, but it does feel good to see a support player get some justification.
Yeah, I mean, all right, you can stop calling him a support. So let's just get that out of the way. But yeah, like you said, that's awesome to see somebody who wasn't a pro beforehand coming in and being like, no, you're doing this all wrong. Follow me. I got this. Like you said, Crusher99. Yeah, there's no way that JJoNak was not winning. And if anyone other than JJoNak did win, it was rigged.
Right.
I'm sorry. All right, political joke. If Shadowbird won, you knew Russia was involved.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, yeah, JJoNak had to win. It's a feel-good story. He's a likable person. It's just, man, I wish he was on a different team. Come on. It's like the rich just getting richer.
Mm-hmm.
Without JJoNak, the New York Excelsior are still the best team in the Overwatch League. But okay, add on top of that the MVP of the league. All right, I hate all of you.
Absolutely. All right, so it's almost game time, so let's head into our main discussion. So obviously we'll talk about what happened in the quarterfinal matches, and then we'll talk about the semifinals. So first up, we had the Philadelphia Fusion that was the 6th seed going up against the Boston Uprising, who were the 3rd seed. And just as a reminder, all of these series were you know, they played 3 sets. I mean, so you got to win at least 2 sets, you know, to get the win. So in set 1, the Fusion beat the Uprising 3 games to 1. In set 2, the Uprising beat the Fusion 3 games to 1. And then set 3, the deciding set, the Fusion defeated the Uprising 3 to 1. So, you know, one of the biggest stories kind of going in was, you know, what Philadelphia Fusion are we going to see? Because they definitely have one of the higher skill ceilings in the Overwatch League. You know, Carpe has been absolutely lights out. He really only loses steam if they played like 14, you know, maps basically in the day, which didn't happen in this case, obviously, because of the format. And EQO really stepped up big again on that flex CPS role, and you know, there were some things that, you know, a lot of people were kind of questioning, like, say, why Dayfly was playing over Neptuno, and why, at the time, Boombox was on the Mercy instead of Dayfly, because Dayfly was on a Roadhog. Well, as it turns out, Neptuno was actually out due to the fact that, he was kind of dealing with some health issues, dealing with a kidney stone. I know he had something else on top of that as well, and it got to the point where he was basically saying, No, I'm good. I can play. So he played through.
I got this.
He played through the injuries, and, you know, that speaks absolute volumes about him. But I definitely have a lot of thoughts on the Uprising, but I want to get your thoughts on this series and what we saw from these teams. Like, were you surprised by the result, knowing that, you know, the Uprising were, you know, one of the teams that really was struggling this past stage, kind of adjusting to the new meta, and having entered another new meta in the stage playoffs, or season playoffs?
Alright, well, for starters, Neptuno, good on you. Playing with a kidney stone and whatever else. Michael Jordan's got nothing on you. Michael Jordan played in the championship game with the flu.
Right.
He never played in the championship game with kidney stones. So let's just get that out of the way. So good for you. But I've been a big proponent against the Boston Uprising all season long. Even when they went undefeated, except they couldn't win the championship. I was like, I still don't believe it. And this kind of proved it. It's just the Uprising are strongest when strikers on Tracer and mistakes can float around. Now, they kind of went the other route in this, and this was very weird to me because I know Mistakes plays Tracer a lot. But then you had Striker on Widow, Mistakes on Tracer, and I'm just like, you have like a top 3 Tracer. You should probably play a comp where that person can be on Tracer. Right. Like, I know you probably need the Widowmaker, but there's ways to work around that comp-wise. It's like being like, hey, Jonak, for this comp, we want you to play Mercy. No, you don't do that. Like, you just don't. Like, so, I don't know. This was not surprising to me. I predicted the Fusion to actually win in 2 instead of 3. It just took a little longer. I'm a big fan of the Fusion, and I think I'm going to go with most of the pro player base and say the Fusion will beat the Excelsior. Because for some godforsaken reason, like, all these pro players are predicting Fusion to beat New York. But I think I think Philly is just one of those teams that is so unique and has such a weird play style that they confuse teams.
Is it so much that, or are all of the players trying to will it to be?
I think it's just one of those things. They don't know what they're gonna get.
Right.
Like, are you gonna get the super aggressive team, Philadelphia Fusion? Or are you gonna get the more, okay, we're gonna wait for our time to go in team? You just don't know who it is, and you don't know how to plan against it. It's like, yeah, it's just one of those things. And then you throw in the Carpe situation, and, you know, EQO, like, that's, I mean, is that as good of a DPS combo as the New York Excelsior have?
Yeah, in this meta, yes.
It's one of those things, like, and here's the thing. Other thing we don't know is for that matchup is Libero going to be on Hanzo. But we'll talk about that when we get to the previews. It's just the Philadelphia Fusion are the team, the best team to go up against Excelsior right now, outside of maybe the Valiant, who have a chance to beat them. And I was just hopeful that the Philadelphia Fusion would make it a little bit more dominant against the Boston Uprising. Like, Boston exceeded literally everyone's expectations tenfold from the beginning of the season. Like, nobody thought they'd be bottom 2 with Shanghai, essentially. And they exceeded everyone's expectations to even get here, especially being the 3 seed. And they put up a good fight. It just wasn't enough.
Yeah, and I had to vent about Boston real quick before we move on to the other quarter-final match. There were some very important things that were very apparent as this series kind of progressed. For one, the viability of Reinhardt and Zarya was an absolute burden to this team because they looked horrendous on it. Kelix was not doing so hot. He had a really hard time staying alive, and part of that is on him for his positioning, but the other part of that is also on the tank line because they have just not been appealing for the support line. And, it's worth noting, like, even when Boston was at their best, when they went 10-0 in Stage 3, Kelix was still in the top 5 in most deaths throughout that stage, which should not happen given how well they did that stage. Because, like, there's too many situations where Kelix just dies first, it becomes a 5v6, and then Boston just gets run over at that point. So heading into the next season, Boston has to address quite a few things. Well, for one, like, right now, they have 5 supports on their roster. We never figured out why the heck that was the case. We never saw the triple support meta, so that never really came into play. But they did not have another option at, DPS or the tank line, and that definitely does hurt them. So I would not expect Kelix to be back. I would expect Cruz from Toronto Esports to take his place on the main roster. But, like, there were moments in this series, especially on Hanamura, where Boston got staggered atrociously. Probably the worst staggers we've seen in the Overwatch League this season. So, there were some really high spots for Boston throughout the season, especially when we were in, the dive meta, and they look like one of the best teams in that specific meta, but adaptability thereafter was just not there for this team, and, it's been there for Philadelphia. And sure, you might not know what you're going to get, but Carpe and EQO are always up to the task when it comes to, going toe-to-toe with the best DPS duos in the league, and they absolutely are one, and I'm definitely looking forward to that series against New York. But let's move on. Let's talk about the other quarterfinal match, which was the London Spitfire, who were the 5 seed, going up against the LA Gladiators, who were the 4 seed, and this series went 2-1 in favor of London. That's right, the lower seeds won in both series, which, pretty surprising, I'll admit. Like, this was the one that I got wrong. Well, we also didn't know that, when we made our predictions that Fisher was not going to be playing. I probably would have flipped my my vote to London at that point. But that's besides the point. So, this series basically came down to London figuring out iRemix in a matter of days, right? iRemix had some moments where he would blindly decide that he was going to dive the Spitfire backline and without any sort of backup or help, which made for a lot of easy opening picks for the Spitfire. But really, like, for me, the story was Gesture in this series. He was playing a ton of Orisa. We got to see a ton of Holt combinations paired with the self-destructs from Fury. And Fury, my god, he was lighting everyone up. He was the only tank in these two series, that was in the top 5 of the damage dealers. Like, you don't really get to see that, especially on someone that primarily, plays D.Va, which was pretty cool to see. We saw Bird Rain absolutely dominating Surefour in the Widow battle. That was an absolute deciding factor. And just everyone across the board for London stepped up. And this is the London that we have been waiting to see since they won all the way back in Stage 1. Obviously, they were trying to figure out, how they were going to combine the, GC Busan roster with the Kondu Panthera roster. And, eventually they got rid of the majority of the core from one side of that. But all in all, like, the Gladiators, there were at times where I was kind of off-put by some of their misreads in the meta, where they were going to, like, a Soldier on the high ground, or running a McCree over a Hanzo, when Hanzo is by far the better option 100% of the time. But, the one major takeaway from the Gladiators, right, was Kane's Row. The great bamboozle, which has been mimicked multiple times on Path to Pro already, even as early as 8 hours after the fact, and it's only worked one time since, which is important to note, because it's happened at least 3 times, not always on the same map, because we have seen it done in NA on Temple of Anubis, but that by far was the greatest play we've ever seen, hands down.
Yeah, I can't even sugarcoat that. That was beyond amazing. Like, yeah, the person who on the Gladiators who came up with that play deserves a GD raise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's something now, but like, you could only pull it off once. You will never be able to, like you said, never be able to pull it off again, because now teams will be like, okay, where are they going? Okay, they have a sniper up there. Like, we know what they're planning. It was just one of those things. And all of this, it shows how much faith the team has in Surefour. Because, like, the thing is if Surefour doesn't get that first pick, this is a bad push. Because he doesn't get that first pick, they realize there's a Widowmaker up there. They adjust where they're at, and now their team, it's like a 5v6 without a Widowmaker in play. So, like, the faith that the Gladiators had in Surefour to get that pick off was insane. And, man, I really wish they would have been able to ride the momentum of that first match to beat the Spitfire, because they had everything going for them.
They did.
iRemix was playing not phenomenal, but better than everyone had expected. They had the momentum going for them, and this team just fell apart. The drama got to the team. I'm sorry, this wasn't a Spitfire win. It was a Gladiators loss. Like, I hate to say it, but do you honestly think that Fissure wouldn't have made that big of a difference against the Spitfire if he was in there?
I'm not saying he wouldn't. I felt like after that Kane's Row match, that was basically the point where London was like, okay, we just got dunked on, like, we have to retaliate. And then just, like, it was a total team effort at that point. But, like, it was huge, though, because, like, London, throughout the rest of the season, had never beaten the LA Gladiators. And then they did it 2 sets in a row by sweeps, nonetheless. But I feel like it's a little bit of A and a little bit of B. Obviously, you don't want to be on the wrong end of what happened on Kane's Row, because that's a play that everyone is talking about, and no one is talking about you, they're talking about the other team. So you have to go out and do something to basically trump them, and, while they didn't have as flashy of a play as that, their play overall definitely succeeded, what the Gladiators had done prior in that series.
Yep. No, it was great. If Fissure would have been in there, I think this would have been a series for the history books. It's just, it's sad that Fissure wasn't in there. And there's always, it's gonna have that asterisk in my mind when, like, okay, the Spitfire beat the Gladiators, asterisk. Then, it's, they beat the Gladiators without their best player. Like, it's just gonna be forever one of those. Nothing like to knock on the Spitfire. The Spitfire are good, and they've proven, like, throughout the whole season that they're one of the best teams. It's just the Gladiators should have probably won that, especially after the first series. And they lost it. So, I don't know. I've never been a big Spitfire person, so...
And that's the difference, because I have been. Okay, so let's talk about the semifinals, which are, starting any minute now. So we got the London Spitfire, who are the 5 seed, going up against the LA Valiant this week, who are the 2 seed. Season story so far, London has led the series 2-1. Valiant took the last series 2-1. All of these games that these teams have played have been down to the wire. Like, they always go the distance or have some crazy draw shenanigans. But what to expect in this series? One, we have Fury on one side, we have Space on the other, so expect an off-tank battle for the ages. I am hyped for this one. Like, Fury has been playing out of his mind quietly as, like, one of the best off-tanks in the league, and Space, our NA boy, gonna be representing the North American Overwatch World Cup team. He's been absolutely just beast mode, nonstop all the time, and I don't know who's going to get the better between the two, but this is, I feel like this series, just knowing the history, is going to be a game of inches. Like, you're going to have to fight for every little bit of meter on the payload, or every tick, essentially. So, for me, like, LA Valiant are coming into this strong. My only question mark is the meta adaptability. I don't know who's going to be the Hanzo player on this team. So for me, it's just a matter of who's going to be on that role, what type of comps are we going to be seeing. If they don't have a Hanzo, will we be seeing, like, the triple support paired with the Widowmaker? Will we see double sniper? Will we see, like, a combination? But at the end of the day, I really feel like Soon is going to be the guy that has to step up for the LA Valiant, because there have been times where Soon absolutely destroys in the Widow duel, and then there's been times where he just hasn't had a presence at all. So I just don't know where it's going to lie, but there is no doubt in my mind that this one is going to go, 3 sets. Like, I can't imagine a 2-0 victory on either side. And this is definitely one that I've been flipping back and forth, but I feel like after what we saw with London and Birdring and Prophet really just kind of having their way with the Gladiators at that point, I feel like I'm leaning towards London still. I think they'll take it 2-1, but no matter what, whoever wins this one is going to be looking pretty damn good. But it would be absolutely crazy, like, if neither LA team makes it through at this point.
Yeah. Now, the thing is I'm kind of biased because, I was a Mayhem fan. But after that map, which shall not be named, where they couldn't get a kill, I started following the Valiant. And I've really started to like the Valiant. Really started to like, the Custa, Soon, that whole team. The makeup of that team is amazing. You nailed it right on the head. I think this entire matchup falls on Soon. Like, the entire matchup. If Soon is popping off, I think that Valiant win easily. Like, easily. It's one of those things. Soon is so inconsistent, like you mentioned. Like, he could make or break the team, or he could be useless. And I think that is ultimately what it's going to come to. Is Soon. You hate to say it comes down to one person, but it really does. I mean, I still think the Valiant have a great team, regardless of what Soon does. So, like, in my book, I'm going to take it the Valiant. I think they'll win 2-1.
Okay.
on this one as well. But I think it will be close. I think the Valiant are just too good of a team. The whole Valiant team, I think part of it has to do with, the love of Custa, the fact that Agilities is one of those great DPS players. Like
When he shows
Agilities, when he shows
when
up.
he's not Agilites.
Yeah. Like for me, it will be interesting to see who's on the Hanzo for. Because, who are you gonna have on it soon? Agilities,
Probably Agilities.
Kareev, Kareev, the trick of all trades, trade of all tricks, whatever. Kareev could even be on it. You're just looking for that, and then like you said, Space. Space is one of the best off tanks in the game. So it's gonna be interesting to me. If I see KSF playing, I might fly to LA and just start punching people in the face.
Okay, so I think at the end of the day, this one's really, really close to call. I feel like the tank line and the support line are dead even on both of these teams. Both of them have been absolutely stellar. I just feel like confidence-wise, I give the nod to Spitfire with their DPS, but I'm looking forward to this one. This is going to be a hype series. But let's talk about that other series. The Beast from the East. We got the Philadelphia Fusion, the 6th seed, going up against the top seed in the New York Excelsior. So looking back, New York has led this season series 4-1. That includes a win in the Stage 2 finals, which, Philadelphia had a lot of things go right in order for them to make it that far. And their sole win over New York came back in Season 1. 3 of the 5 games that these teams have played have gone the distance. So, okay, something that we've kind of seen with the playoffs is we have seen a rise of solo support play. So that really makes you wonder, okay, so is JJoNak going to make or break the New York Excelsior in this series? Because a lot of people are just assuming, without JJoNak on the Zenyatta, that New York can't win. That's what a lot of people are saying. A lot of people don't realize how flexible JJoNak is, and we've seen a lot of these Zenyatta players bring in the Roadhog for the triple tank and really make a huge impact. And, with everything we've seen from JJoNak, it's hard to argue that he's not going to be amazing no matter what he plays. But this is going to be one of those DPS battles that you won't want to miss. I mean, you have EQO and, Carpe, and then you'll have a combination of Saebyeolbe, Libero, Pine, and I don't know who I would favor in this case, because EQO has been looking damn good. I felt like this meta definitely favors Philadelphia at this given time. But it's so hard to pinpoint where exactly New York is going to be, because we did see them, let loose on the gas pedal a little bit less stage. And, there's a lot of question marks just about, well, is that fall off really going to affect them going into the playoffs? Or were they trying to not let it get on as much as they were trying to show, basically? So I feel like Libero and EQO are probably going to be the X factors in this series. I'm sure we're going to be seeing Libero on the Hanzo for New York Excelsior. Granted, they have 4, possible people that could really be playing the Widowmaker in this case. But I think at the end of the day, in this series in particular, I think the frontline battle will be won by New York, and that should be what tilts it in their favor. But I'm expecting better things from Philly. We're not going to have Boombox relegated to Mercy duty. Neptuno will hopefully be in throughout the entire series. And the support lines on both of these teams are so hype. I cannot wait for this. So I'm sticking with my pick for New York. I am wanting to see an all-Korean final, and I know a lot of people would absolutely hate me for saying that. I don't care. I want to see Korea versus Korea. But, the skill gap there's no doubt the skill gap between Korea and the rest of the world is shrinking almost to the point where you can't even notice it anymore. But I feel like the level of consistency that we have seen from New York far exceeds what we have seen from Philadelphia. Not to take away what we've seen from them, but, you know, if Carpe is on his game and Sabiovi is, you know, mirroring him, like, who knows? Like, whoever is hot could be the deciding factor in this one. But I'm going 2-1 in favor of New York in that one.
All right, so I'm with you. No, I'm not with you. I really want the Fusion to win.
Mm-hmm.
I do want the Fusion to win because I don't want to see the team that is supposed to win. I'm just one of those people. New York is supposed to win. I think this, just like the last match in, you know, where it kind of comes down to soon for the Valiant versus the Spitfire. I honestly think this matchup comes down to Pine, of all people. I think if Pine can control his, hey, I'm gonna contest the point as Widowmaker and try and scope in and kill people that way.
I'm gonna snipe Carpe from 2 feet away.
Yeah, like if he can control that, and if Pine really pops off, New York Excelsior will win them. If he can't and Philadelphia can control him, then they have a shot. But I think that's really the only shot they have. I know I said earlier that I think I want to agree with all the commenters or the pro players and say Philadelphia will win. I'm going New York in 2. Going 2-0. It's just, they're so goddamn talented.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate them for it. But it's one of those things where you're just like, okay, there's a reason they have 7 players in the All-Star game. They have more players in the All-Star game than they have starters. Like, they have backups in the All-Star game. Like, that's insane. That's how good this team is. So, like, yeah, no. It's going to be a 2-0.
All right. Well, with that being said, guys, let's go ahead and close out the show for tonight so we can go ahead and go watch the semifinal matches. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best ways to do that is to go leave us a positive review over on iTunes. I know we got a 5-star. They did not leave, like, a written review, which is fine. But we appreciate you guys sending in any review, whether it is written, whether it is just, you know, just clicking on the 5-star. We're always looking for ways to improve the show. An update on Overwatch Recall. You know, I'll mention this again. You know, every Sunday night we do our weekly recall, which is a list of all the latest Overwatch League, Path to Pro podcast content out there that's on our website. And I have my first interview booked for next Wednesday. Before Heroes Never Die, obviously. But we're not going to be live streaming over the Overwatch Recall podcast. This is going to be something that basically, like, I will pre-record audio for, like, the news bits, and then the interview will be done separately. So expect to see an episode for that here within the next week, 2 weeks at the very latest. But Ed, why don't you go ahead and let our listeners know where they can get a hold of our podcast over on the social medias.
All right, well, you can reach us on the email at hndoverwatch@gmail.com. You can reach us on Twitter at hndoverwatch. We do have a website that Totem has been working on, having fun times with, from what I hear, at owlnshow.com. So go check that out.
It's up now. It's working fully working.
It's fully working. All right.
Yeah, no 502 errors.
Make sure you point out to him in the comment section about the space to the left.
I fixed it. Nope, it's already fixed. Ha!
Fine. Damn it. All right.
Ruined.
So go there. You can watch us on Twitch, which you should be watching us now, and having a second tab open on the Overwatch League network. As both me and Totem, I guarantee you have right now. So come watch us on Twitch at twitch.tv/show. So we are a Twitch affiliate. You can support the show by subscribing to our Twitch channel, unlock our network emoticon. So thanks again to everyone who's been watching our shows live and interacting with the chat. If you'd like to catch us live, we're broadcasting 3 nights a week. OWLN Mondays. So Overwatch League Network is Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. Heroes Never Die is Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, unless there's an Overwatch League playoff game.
We'll be back to normal next week.
And we'll be back next week. We just figured, why record during the middle of all of it? And then the back cap is on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Pacific. And then host streams will be held on Fridays and Saturdays at 7:30 p.m. Pacific. So Spider's usually on Friday, Totem's usually on Saturday. And then we do have a Discord. So come join us on Discord at discord.me/OWLN show. And then lastly, we are on YouTube. So you can find us on YouTube at the Overwatch League Network. So we're getting close to our custom URL. So please go subscribe. We can get a custom URL, which will make things way easier to find. So all our podcast episodes, top plays, other videos can be found there. Like we'll have some Wrecking Ball. I'm calling him Wrecking Ball to fight the man and not call him Hammond. So we'll have those up soon. And then you can reach me personally, Ednar, on Twitter at Ednar Overwatch. And you can see me on I stream sometimes on Twitch at Ednar OW. Totem, where can they find you?
Well, I am over on the Twitter. This is that little blue bird. Generally just trolling people, talking scary movies, wrestling, or, mostly just promoting Overwatch stuff at Totally Drunk CTR. And if I'm live on Twitch, of course, it'll be on our podcast channel 3-4 nights a week. Yeah, that's basically it. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to cut out, we'll go watch the semifinals, and, yeah, that'll about cover it. So next week, obviously we'll talk a little bit more about Hammond, some upcoming PTR changes, which are pretty drastic, but for now, guys, we hope you have a good night, enjoy the playoffs, and we will see you back next week. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to Heroes Never Die. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HND Overwatch and join us on Discord at discord.me/OWLN show.